When I was 5 years old, my favorite TV program was Sesame Street, and especially the segment on taking care of your pet. You know, it talked about what are the things you have to do if you have a pet, including like giving it a bath. And this was my pet. So, yes, when my mother was busy doing something, I decided to give my goldfish a bath. And you can imagine that it didn't turn out the way I had planned. My 5-year-old self learned 3 very important things that day. First is context is very important. Number 2, disappointment and heartbreak are part of life. And number 3, you can't bathe a fish. It was also the very first time that I remember experiencing shame and guilt. Shame is, for the most part, in our society, something that we don't really talk about a lot. It's kind of confused with other emotions, even though it's something that all of us will maybe have felt, will feel, and maybe even feeling right now. It's not something that we really talk a lot about. And it's often, as I said, confused with other emotions. So let's for a second define shame and its very close friends, guilt, humiliation, and embarrassment. So guilt is, I did something bad. Shame is, I am bad. Humiliation is, my teacher just humiliated me in front of the entire class because I didn't know the answer. Shame is, my teacher humiliated me in front of the entire class. I didn't know the answer because I'm so stupid. Embarrassment is, I tripped and fell off the stage. I don't know how I'm going to face these people now. Shame is, I tripped and fell off the stage because that's just so typically me. I'm completely useless. I don't even know why I try. So you see, those are very distinct things, but oftentimes confused for the same emotion, especially shame and guilt. Shame and guilt are often used as the same, but they're very distinctly different. So guilt is focusing on behavior. You know, I did something bad. I made a mistake. And it's actually very useful because it is something that you're admitting to. It's a transgression that didn't live up to your moral standard of who you are. And it actually is a catalyst to make change, to make amends for something that you've done wrong. So everybody that's had a mother that is really good at giving you guilt trips, it's actually a good thing. It's very useful. Sandra, you do that? Oh, yes. Shame, on the other hand, is an intensely painful feeling that we are not worthy, that something that we've done or something that we are, something in our being, doesn't allow us the best things in life. So we're unworthy of love and joy and all these things. As the pioneering psychologist Carl Jung said, shame is a soul-eating emotion. That's basically what it is. And the only people that don't feel shame are sociopaths and psychopaths. Those are the only people in the world that do not feel the emotion shame. So by now you're thinking, okay, what in the world, why is she talking about this on International Women's Day? Like, what does this have to do with anything? Well, it has a lot to do with it. And I think we heard a little bit of that in Sandra's speech as well, about the women that are coming into SEDEM. I think that this is the emotion that is at the core and the center of a lot of the issues that we're facing as women, but as men as well, as a society at large. And it is our inability to, first of all, identify it, recognize it, admit to it, and be able to deal with it that is really impeding us from progressing as women. And again, as just a society at large, but especially women. And I'll get to that in a second here. So again, as we talk about equality and improving the status of women and improving all these things that we want, eliminating discrimination, removing violence from our lives, all of those things cannot happen until we talk about this subject. So researchers have looked at this for many years. But very recently, they're diving deeper into this subject. It's something that has even eluded a lot of scientists around that have looked at this, the psychotherapists and psychologists, but they've been looking at studies around this, around shame. And what they've discovered is very interesting and alarming at the same time. They have found absolute correlation between shame and anger, depression, aggression, domestic violence, eating disorders, suicide, and bullying. That's just to name a few. So you see that at the center, at the core of all of these things, they're finding shame. What they also discovered is that we all react to situations or shame triggers differently. What is shameful for me is not shameful for you. So those are differences. It is also that some of us are more shame prone. So in certain situations, my reaction is going to be, I feel shame about something, and whereas somebody else might be more shame resilient. So these are all these differences that we're finding. But one of the things that they find that is similar is our responses to it. A lot of times when we talk about shame, again, it's a subject that we don't like to talk about, we want to hide it. We hide it, we bury it very deep, and we just, we don't want to admit it. It's so painful. Then we oftentimes want to numb it. So this is where you see that addiction comes into place, because we don't want to feel this intensely painful thing. So we numb it. What they've also discovered, interestingly enough, is that some people then go to expressing it outwardly. So then they blame, they get angry, they get violent, they get aggressive. Well, why? Well, an example is, this is completely theoretical, did not happen, but I'll use this because I practice this with my daughter. She's like, you would never do that. I woke up this morning and I sent my daughter off to school. It was her birthday and I forgot. I forgot to wish her a happy birthday. I am a terrible mother. Can you imagine what kind of mother does that? I feel completely ashamed about that. But you know what? It's my husband's fault. Because I was busy doing something for him last night and I didn't sleep properly. And so I forgot this morning. So it's all his fault. Does that sound familiar? The inward, and then we express it outward because we got to get rid of this. And this is what we are discovering around this emotion that is at the heart of so many things that we're facing. Another interesting discovery, research from Dr. June Tagney from George Mason University. In 2002, she finalized a longitudinal study that tracked grade 5 students all the way to their 18th birthday. And what she discovered in tracking those were that the shame-prone children were less likely to go to college, less likely to practice safe sex, more likely to use drugs and alcohol, more likely to feel depressed and suicidal, and more likely to engage in criminal activity. So again, Sandra alluded to it about those children that are feeling unloved. Well, again, if you look at it, what are they feeling? They're feeling shame because of their situation, even though it has actually nothing to do with them. Even though it may not necessarily be about their behavior, but that is the response that they are feeling. And oftentimes, again, we don't want to say, yes, we feel ashamed about something, because it sounds like we're admitting to something, like we've admitted to doing something wrong. But in fact, oftentimes, it has nothing to do with what we've done, but it is a perception or a judgment of others, of ourselves, of society at large, about who we are as a person. I was born, as Aideen said, she gave away my age, September 20th, 1969, in Toronto, Canada. And for as long as I can remember, see those two beautiful people right there. I look kind of funny, don't I? As long as I can remember, I knew that I was adopted as a newborn. So it wasn't something that, was a secret to me, because my parents never kept that as a secret to me. But as I grew, I realized, there's a little bit of shame attached to that. It's not something that I should really be talking about, because, adoption, children that are adopted, means kind of like you were not wanted. So something that we might want to just keep to ourselves, even though there was nothing to show that I should be shameful of this. But again, it is in the context, and that is at a time where social media wasn't really around. So imagine how much more these things are amplified today. Incredibly. Another example. A year ago, almost to the day, March 7th, 2015, a group of men who are supportive of the opposition party launched a story on social media saying that they were in possession of a sex tape featuring myself. Now, when I first read this, I have to tell you I was a little flattered. Because I'm thinking, like, if anybody thinks that a 46-year-old has the body confidence to film a sex tape at 46-year-old, it's kind of amusing. It's a little funny. But of course, that's not the reason why they've fabricated this story, and it's irrelevant that no such tape exists. It is just, in this day and age, it is the mere mention or suggestion or accusation of immoral behavior, of something to be shameful of, that it is enough. And as women, we are subjected to a lot of shame, or shame potential. So if you can imagine, fat shaming, body shaming, appearance, image shaming, victim shaming, slut shaming, the list can go on. Shaming for women that decide to breastfeed in public, or shaming for women that decide to not breastfeed and bottle feed their baby. So it is, again, this response from a society, and oftentimes it's not just, unfortunately, not just men, but women also that participate in this. And it is really a way to keep us small, to keep us silent and in our place. And so this is really why I say at the core of these issues is this emotion that we need to be able to get a grips with. Brene Brown is also a foremost expert in this field. And she said, when women experience shame, they feel trapped, powerless, and isolated. So these are the emotions. And again, when we say we can't talk about, equality and how are we going to improve this condition of women and make better conditions and better opportunities for women without talking about, well, what is at the core of preventing us from getting there, and what is at the core of a society and of men that don't want us to get there. So what is the underlying cause? And we keep debating the symptoms. We keep debating, it's this and it's this, but those are all the symptoms, not the actual underlying cause. It's like trying to fix a leaky bucket by adding more water. It's just not going to work. So we really need to get and strip down and get to what is at the source of it. So she talks, again, Brene Brown talks about, well, how do we, if we know this, how do we fix this? What do we need to do actually to get to this? Shame resilience, because I said we can't remove it. We can't get rid of it because it's part of being a functioning human being. So we need to learn the tools of how we're going to be shame resilient. And it's three things. learn what it is. So really, that this is part of it. Recognizing that this is something that is existing. Learn when you're in it, and put a voice to it. It is really about not keeping that part silent, because it's that taboo, it's that ability to keep hiding it that gives it so much power. Other researchers have also looked at, well, what are the things and what makes people so shame resilient and what makes them be able to cope with these situations? Vulnerability is a big thing. So if we're willing to be vulnerable, we're willing to put ourselves out there, even though we may be laughed at, we may trip and fall. Those are some of the tools that help us in the long run. Empathy, compassion, authenticity, those are all armor against what we're seeing from a society in large and how we're going to be able to surpass those. A lot of what we heard from today, from SADEM, working with women in rewriting that narrative from I feel shame, I feel unworthy, I feel invaluable. Those are the tools, and that's what we need to do to work to get to help those women. There's another part of that, and that is about parenting. Because we heard also Sandra talk about parenting and parents being present at certain things. And you know, when we talk about this bullying issue, people always say, well, what are you doing about bullying at school? And I say, well, you know what? Bullying is not a school problem. It's our society's problem. Because it's just a reflection of what's happening outside of school. And so if we're not fixing it there, how on earth are we going to be able to fix it in schools? And unfortunately, there's been a wave towards using shaming as a parenting tool. Because the thought is, well, if I strip dignity from this poorly behaving child, I shame them because I don't want to see this behavior anymore, they are sure not going to do that again. And so we see things like this. This little boy, as his father not just did this, but took a picture and then put it up onto social media, he's acting like a grown man, so we're going to give him a grown man haircut. Well, that's public shaming and public humiliation. Again, with the thought, well, if I do this, he's sure not going to misbehave again. But in fact, that is absolutely not the case. What I've just shown you is that maybe temporarily this will happen, but we are definitely not going to see a sustained change in behavior. I threw up in my car seat, in my new car seat, the very first time I sat in it. So parents, yeah. Oh, it's endless. Babies. I start screaming the second mommy sits down for dinner or gets in the bath every single day. So again, this is probably a pattern from parents that have also been shamed, that see this as normal, that see this as an actual good tool, parenting tool. Teenagers that are meant to stand with boards and talk about all the terrible things they do. But if we actually had to do this to all teenagers, I think streets would be full. Not even pets are excluded. So we see that there is a response, there is a false belief that doing this is actually going to stop this behavior, when in fact what it does is that we are building a society that believes that shaming is okay, and then just creating and perpetuating even worse behavior. We are building bullies. We are building people that do not feel empathy and compassion. Locally, to put it in the local context, I see all the time pictures on media sites of minors that have committed crimes. These three were caught stealing. Their pictures taken and put online. Because again, there is a belief that, well, when we do this, they're never going to do it again. And it's going to deter others from doing that, when in fact, that's not the case. You know, interestingly enough, in Papiamento, there is no word for shame that is distinct. It's vergüenza. Vergüenza is embarrassing, means also shame, but it means like a whole bunch of things. So there's no specific word that describes this. And we hear that word vergüenza used so often, don't we? Politicians like to use that word a lot, but other people do too. So there is this idea and this notion that this is how we're going to fix our society, by pointing at all the people that we think should be shameful, when in fact that's absolutely the opposite of what we need. This is where, again, the tools that we are trying to put out there, Tienda de Educación, which is a telephone number, a support service that we have for parents to help them with, okay, well, what does work then? What are the things that we do need? Because we don't want to see this behavior. What are the things that will actually work? And Tienda de Educación is in our MDC, our multidisciplinary center that works with schools to also enforce what are the positive ways for us to raise children, educate children. Conscious discipline, also program that we need in schools to be able to show educators how to address whether it's behavior, whether it's behavior that's undesirable, but just in general, how to support and get the most positive responses out of our students. Miro Mangrandi, as we heard, again, working one-on-one with so many of these boys and girls that need that guidance. So in closing, I think the time has come for us to do some deep soul searching as a community. And, you know, we in this room, the women and the men here, have the ability to lead the charge in creating a more cohesive, accepting, equal, shame-resilient society. And, you know, a lot of times we talk about, well, we need laws and we need policies to be able to improve women's status and to fix all the problems. But, you know, again, laws without a change in mentality and a fundamental change in belief systems is not going to work. And so, again, it is about the choices, going back to this choices, how we choose to raise our children, how we choose to treat each other, because the shaming that you think that you're doing today, judging somebody else, is like a boomerang that comes back to us eventually. And as said, I'm not sure who said this, sure, it was somebody smart. You know, the good in people is the greatest law. And that's really what we need to be searching for. Thank you very much. You were like, yes, okay, get off the stage. Thank you very much. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you very much for coming.